So, hi everyone. I hope we guys are live now. Uh, Thanks a lot for joining in and to take out time today. I know everyone is at home and but on a lot of calls and all. And I would love to thank my panelists who joined in today. Uh, Maybe I will just put some context what we are doing in entrepreneurship 2.0 post COVID-19 and a brief introduction about wonderful panelist I have today. Why we thought about this topic was that there is too much of noise. A lot of things are happening around us. Many webinars are happening on the same topic, and many valuable speakers are there to teach us how to do things right. And I thought this is an opportunity for us to bring on people I know who are experts into this domain, and maybe we can just get benefit from all these guys. So today in the panel, I have Arjun Rao, who is general partner of Speciali Invest. It's a venture capital fund. We have Kailash Nath, who is senior associate at Bharat Innovation Fund, which is again a venture capital fund. We have Pravesh Goyal, who is my partner and managing partner at Nucleus Advisors. We have Chandar Nakul, who is director BD from Emicorp Group. It's a fiduciary services provider corporate group which is spanned to across many countries I don't even recall. And then we have Jidesh, who runs a firm, Kingstub and Kasiwa. He's a very dear friend and a lawyer by profession. And maybe I will just take each one of us to each one of you guys to put a brief intro about you, and just we can take discussion from there. Maybe Arjun, we can start with you.
Hey, thank you, Vijay, so much. Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks for having us. I'm Arjun Rao. I run a venture capital fund called Special Invest. Right, we're a $20 million fund focused on seed stage investments in deep technology. We typically do very early stage investments to the tune of $500,000 to $1 million in emerging technology platforms, both software and hardware. B2B, enterprise, SaaS.
Thank you, Rishi, so much. Good morning, everyone. Good to be here.
And on the hardware side, do a bunch of industrial hardware also. All right, we've been around for 3+ years and have 10+ companies in the portfolio, and continuing to look for opportunities to invest over the next couple of years.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Arjun. Maybe Kailash, we can move to you.
Yeah. First of all, thanks, Vijay. Thanks for having me on the panel, and wonderful to be a part of such a vibrant panel too. To give an introduction about us, I work for an investment firm, Bharat Innovation Fund. We are a $100 million venture capital firm. We invest in companies with deep tech offerings. So technology IP is what we look for when we evaluate and support a company. We've been around for about 1.5 years now. We invest in about 7 companies. 6 we have publicly announced. 7th is in the works, in the transaction closure process. We're a sector agnostic firm, typically investing at pre-Series A and Series A, and selectively Series B stages. Our ticket sizes ranges anywhere between $1 million to $2.5 million based on the sector, stage, depending on our confidence and so on. We look to make investments in the next 3.5 years and build a portfolio of maybe about 18-20 companies, depending on how opportunities come by. So one thing that we typically tell our entrepreneurs is, probably we'll cover in the conversations as well, is unit economics is something that we clearly look for when we look when we evaluate opportunities. Something that we'll touch upon as we go in the conversation too, but just to give you a sense of what we are doing. But happy to be a part of this conversation and look forward to your questions as well.
Thanks a lot, Kailash. Wonderful to have you. Maybe Pravesh, so you can just put a few lines.
Thank you, Vijay, and a big thank you for all our audience who are viewing the live seminar right now. My name is Pravesh Goyal. I'm a managing partner in Nucleus Advisor. Nucleus Advisor focuses on startup and SMEs, and we excel in investment banking, cross-border taxation, and risk advisory. So other than that, we have a separate and dedicated team for compliances and VCFO services, which take care of the all the finance function of the startup and SME. And we our endeavor is to provide service so that entrepreneurs should focus on their business and not on compliances and finance function. It has been 15 years plus I've been working on these areas, and all my partners are either from Big Four consulting firm or big corporate group. And we hope today's webinar would be of interest of you, and we would cover various aspects which would be bothering many of us amid this COVID situation.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Maybe Chandar, we can go on with you.
Yeah. Thank you, Vijay, for inviting me for this panel discussion. And I would like to say a few words about what we do. I look after the business development and sales activities for Amicorp Group, and we are a global fiduciary services provider and a fund administrator working in multiple geographies and present in about 40 odd locations all across the globe. And the focus is towards working with corporates, startups, large groups, looking at business expansion and business support services in overseas markets, assisting with the local compliances, looking after the administrative activities, and doing all the necessary work when it comes to managing the entities and managing the group structures across. And in the fund space, we are setting up offshore funds and onshore funds for our clients and looking after the day-to-day activities from an administrator's perspective and looking after all the compliances for them, and are also engaged in various other activities revolving around compliance solutions going to FATCA, CRS, GDPR, and so on. And I would say this is pretty much it in a very, very brief way. And I'd like to pass it on to Jidesh now.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Jidesh,
Chandru. Good morning, friends from across the world. I'm Jidesh Kumar. I am the managing partner of a law firm called King Stubb & Pesiwa. We have offices in the cities of New Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, Chennai, Hyderabad, and Kochi. We primarily are a corporate M&A, private equity, venture capital focused law firm. We also have associate practices including dispute resolution, intellectual property, real estate, labor and employment, banking and finance, and projects and energy. So that's about me. So let's get, I now move it to Vijay to start the proceedings of the day. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Jidesh. Also, I lost few words of yours, but that's completely fine. We're going to cover a lot of things today, so we are good to go by that way. So that's the beauty of this panel today. We have two venture capitals, one an international taxation expert, one cross-border expert, and one corporate lawyer. So that sums up a whole what business require to run: money, tax advice, growth advisory, and the law advisory. So perfect. Maybe now we can jump to questions. We have been seen on YouTube and Facebook right now. Whoever is viewing us, you can drop questions in the comment section. I would take these questions from in the last. Don't feel that your question is not appearing on the screen, because that I control. Whatever is the relevant question according to the current forum, I will just click on that question, and that will show your name, your photo, and your comment. And maybe you can just divert that question to whoever expert you want to have question with. Maybe it could be Arjun, Kailash, Chandar, anyone, right? And I will just pick up this after we finish up few questions which I have, because I am been into too much of worry to know all these answers. So I will just jump with the questions. Maybe I would love to start with Arjun, you, and I have already, I will just show up the question also, and we can just start discussing this, right? So that goes my first question, that what founders of 2019 should do now to survive 2020 and onwards, because what kind of thing we saw in 2019 and previous is not now valid. And are we going to see a new breed of entrepreneurs taking charge during and post COVID-19? So over to you, Arjun. Maybe you can enlighten us on this.
Yeah, thanks. Right, I think no question, we're all living in unique times. Therefore, and it is still early days of what is panning out over the last 1 to 2 months globally and in India. Right, a lot of changes, a lot of information that is flowing, and we still don't know what the future is going to look like. Right, so definitely it calls for some sort of a reset, some sort of a rethink, and reevaluation of how businesses are run, how startups are built, right? And this is obviously particularly relevant to founders and entrepreneurs, right? Things are not the same, right? And while as the virus abates and hopefully things come back to a little more normal, there will be a lot of changes about how the world is viewed and how business is done going forward, right? So founders need to take cognizance of that. We've kind of had the luxury of the last 10 years, maybe a little more, being great bull run, right? Everywhere across the world, right? A lot of capital has flowed in, a lot of businesses have gotten built, right? Maybe somewhere along the way there was uh, a loss of or missing out on basic fundamentals of business in some cases, right? Which meant growth at all costs, revenue and customer acquisition at all costs was one of the mantras that was very important for startups to focus on. Because if you didn't do that, somebody else would, raise money or have capital and would capture customer, right? And along the way, maybe unit economics and fundamentals of building a solid business with good margins were uh, were not focused upon. Now, given these circumstances that we live in, definitely there's going to be a rethink on that front, right? I think Kailash right at the beginning mentioned unit economics, margins are going to be super, super important, right? How do you acquire customers? How do you focus on sustainability, survivability of your business, and build something for the long haul is going to be super important. So founders' lens has to take that into consideration when they're making their business plan, when they're pitching to investors, and most importantly for them inwardly, right? To be able to play this game over a long, long period of time, right? Expectations of valuations, therefore, will also change, right? Us as investors are to think doubly hard in terms of what makes a good startup, what makes a good investment, right? The bar is a lot higher, right? Going forward now, right? If I was doing, let's say, one deal out of, every 100 deals or every 200 deals that I saw, I will probably be able to look at 400 deals now and then make one deal, right? Which means I'm looking for obviously great founders like I was looking for earlier. I'm looking for great economics. I'm looking for resilience. I'm looking for, ability to navigate tough situations. I want founders to look at what can $1 do for me much more than what in the past. All right. So making a dollar count is something that a founder should look for. Right? So frugality comes back into the picture, which for a few years hasn't been the case. Right. Resilience, I think, is the other word because we don't know the future and because we don't know what impact the macro and the micro economies are going to have in what time frames, right? Whether this is going to solve in 2 quarters, we don't know. Whether it's going to take 2 years, we don't know, right? So resilience becomes more important. What becomes most important for an entrepreneur is to figure out, right, what are my existing resources, both capital and my team, right? And what can I do? How long can I last with this? If I have the ability to last longer, I have the ability to solve problems, right? If I give myself the chance, then there are chances that my survival lead to growth in the future, right? It's not about how fast you grow in the next 1 to 2 years. It is about do you survive the next 1 to 2 years, right? So I would put high degree of value on resilience, adaptability, and frugality, right, in these times. And hopefully these founders that have these traits or are able to adapt, right? If they did not have that, then they start focusing and prioritize these aspects in their mindset and in their business mindset. They're able to do that, I think, immediately and going forward, those sorts of entrepreneurs, I think, will have a great ability to build good businesses during and after these times, right? The way I would also, one point I would like to make here is that if you look at the last, financial downturn global, right? Great businesses were built that started around that time, right? Which means there is a silver lining. It's not all doom and gloom, right? Yes, there is a lot of chaos right now and a lot of uncertainty, but the silver lining is that the best businesses that were formed during 2008, 2009 globally, right, have over a longer period of time have been around for 10 years plus and are doing extremely well today, right? Which means there's an opportunity, right, in this chaotic time frame for entrepreneurs, right? Keep in mind how to look at fundamentals and how to look at building something sustainable and resilient for a long time, right? Hopefully that should help entrepreneurs.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Arjun, to put it so beautifully. Anyway, founders were too much in chaos at how things will happen now, and they were anyway struggling for fundings now, but they have to adapt also. That's what you said, and very right, that they have to now adapt to the new circumstances, come up with new problems to solve, and now we will see a new generation to come in, and maybe now this new decade we'll see a new kind of companies to come out, right? And maybe we will discussing it more further. The one problem which founders are going to face, which you also said, the funding thing. Maybe this calls me for the second question from Kailash. Kailash, maybe you can just put some light on this question I have, that startups are going to face dearth funding available from VCs and PEs. How much of this estimation is correct, and how Bharat Innovation Fund sees its future investments? Maybe you can just put light on this.
Yeah. You can hear me well, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, okay, sure. So let me build on what Arjun also mentioned in his question. One thing that I have learned pretty early in my investment career is investments are subjective, right? I mean, it's not a science; it's an art, which means there is no clear yes or no. Not just for times like this, but in general, even at a stable state, there is no rule for investments in general. So if you're going to ask me, is venture capital sort of come to a standstill? I don't think there's a clear yes or no. It still depends on who the investor is, what kind of investment opportunity it is. One definitely, like Arjun mentioned, there's adaptability that's going to be a part of the question. That's going to be part of the equation when it comes to funding conversations. So great businesses will still find investors who can back them, which is why the word I use on unit economics when I introduced myself. Companies which have been, like Arjun said, frugal and conscious about how the business is developing, what is the kind of business plan they have, tweaking them, making changes as situation demands it, especially situation like this where it's tough, right? I mean, it's finding clients to sign up to your offering. I mean, especially in a not just a B2C but also B2B environment too, where the sales cycles might be longer. You're talking about operational cash flow taking longer to hit your bank account. It's not just about growth at all costs, like Arjun said. It's also about what is the resilience that the entrepreneur is bringing to the table, right? How strong is the business model? How are you building your growth path? That determines a lot about what's the probability of success going to be when you go and talk to your potential investors. I know of venture capital firms which have held back on investments at this point in time. One, because they want to take stock of how the portfolio is looking at and make sense. It's very important for investors to make sure that their portfolio, the existing investments, are safe before they take future calls. But for sure, there are firms too which are open for business, especially at Bharat Innovation Fund. We haven't closed out our firm, and we are still looking for opportunities. We started this year saying that we look to make some really good healthcare bets. One, because we have investors who are RLPs, like Philips. The global team of Philips is an investor in us. We also have got investments from the fund of fund entity of BioRack, which is called ACE Fund, right? So we have natural inclination towards doing healthcare and life sciences. So we'll still continue to look for opportunities. Sure, like Arjun also mentioned, the bar is going to be higher. We are going to look at not just the offering or not technical details, but also how the entrepreneur, the founding team is looking through on the growth path, which has been the question too. But now it will be a much tougher question. We'll dig much more deeper into what the response from the founding team is going to be. But as an answer to a question, it's subjective. Are companies going to face dearth of funds? Not really. It's not. At times like this brings the best in entrepreneurs. Not just the individual, but also as an ecosystem, you'll find the best of entrepreneurs, emerging from a crisis like this. And for sure, great businesses will find capital. They'll find growth opportunities. You will see clients zeroing down on the best product that's out there in the market. So yes, you might see the volume might dip, but definitely the kind of activity that goes out in evaluating companies, diligence activities will not come to standstill. They're still going to, venture capital will still keep happening through the crisis time as well. Yeah.
Perfect. So I'm making my notes from you guys, and that's quite a good note, Kailash, because everyone is now confused that will VCs will continue to invest, and will there be a scarcity of funds? But yes, what you said is correct, that for good founders there won't be a scarcity. But yes, the bar is now being raised. It's not so easy like how we saw people were going to raise funding very easily, and most cash funding startups. I have this question already, and I will get a look with you. But maybe now the psychology of investors will now change, and they will look for more prominent startups to come in. But yes, what you said, that funding will be available for those guys. So thanks a lot, Kailash, for putting this across. And maybe Jidesh, I will jump to you now. I have my next question to you, which is, as you are a lawyer, so whoever is best to answer this, how Indian judiciary will evolve around startups, and will there be some relaxation for startup founders who are not able to service their EMIs, rent, salaries, and other commitments? Let me tell you why I came up with this question, because right now cash cycle is burned for everyone, right? All startups are facing this cash crunch. Their EMI salaries have to be cut for, and then rents are on, like they're not able to service their rents and EMIs. But how do you look at it? Will startups will get some relaxations from Indian judiciary? Maybe you have some inside information you can just share with us on this open platform today.
Sure. Thank you, Vijay. Firstly, the Indian judiciary has been pretty proactive and I would say a lot benevolent towards entrepreneurs, and have been passing some fantastic awards during the COVID crisis. Let me also tell you that the courts in general are closed. However, the courts have adopted technology, and now we have a lot of e-courts system in place. So this opens up two kind of avenues. One, of course, quick justice through methods. I think there'll be a lot of opportunity for startups to come and participate in that, as an ecosystem player. But I think from the court per se, I think the courts are pretty benevolent. I think one judgment which came recently from the Delhi High Court was where an issue of bank guarantee was stayed, and so it said that this situation would be treated as a force majeure event. Now so this order came only from the Delhi High Court, so it's not applicable to the entire country. But I'm sure that slowly all other courts in the country would follow the same tenor, and try and ensure. I mean, hopefully, so someday some matter will go to the Supreme Court, and that will become the law of the land. Now, when it comes to relaxations, this is not just for startups. This is also for established companies, and also for some startups who become unicorns. So I'm the lawyer for some really good startup unicorns, including firms like Flipkart, Swiggy, Make My Trip, and a lot of other companies, 1MG and stuff like that, as well as a lot of established companies. So, in fact, this is a very important thing, especially servicing EMIs, rents, salaries, and other commitments. I think the first step would probably be to review your agreements, because there could be certain provisions within your rental agreement which talks about force majeure. And if it doesn't talk about force majeure, you'll have to see if there is any talk of this concept called frustration of a contract. And assuming that these two talk only about termination or end of life of a lease deed, then very, very clearly in your rental agreements, there will be this clause of peaceful possession and enjoyment. Now, look, this is a very good point to actually sit down with the landlord and negotiate with. So let me tell you that almost all the major unicorns and established companies have already initiated this process. I see that startups are a little shy. I would say please take up the risk, because no landlord is going to say no to you. Even if he were to say no to you, he would still you could still have a negotiating power. He might not give you a full waiver. He could give you a deferment, but if you do not try, you are not going to get it. So I think this is a good commercial legal situation. So where you could probably play the good cop and the bad cop routine, where you end up being the good cop, talk to the lessor and try and convince him to grant waivers on rentals. I mean, in my experience, we have been able to get extensions from 21 days up to 3 months for different kinds of clients. So it might not just come. All landlords are not the same. All the lessees are not the same. So you might not get. You might not get response from the landlord in one tranche. It could come in multiple tranches. Now, it's very important for you to also understand what is force majeure. Look, force majeure is, I mean, in general parlance, means act of God or any act which is beyond your control. But let me also tell you that force majeure is not a statutory right. It doesn't flow from any statute. So it is more a contractual right. So if you've defined force majeure in your agreement, then that is your force majeure. So I've had some clients come to me and said, hey, the Ministry of Finance has a set definition of force majeure. Ministry of Power has its own set of definition on force majeure. None of that would apply to you. So what is your force majeure is what is there in your agreement. Let me also tell you that force majeure might not come to your rescue all the times, because it could be a situation of force majeure. It is a recognized situation of force majeure, but your agreement does not cover for force majeure. So during these times, it's important to rely on various other doctrines. There is a doctrine of suspension. There is a doctrine of impossibility. There's a doctrine of improbability, and various other doctrines. I think these are all common law principles which have been upheld by the various high courts as well as the Supreme Court. So these could be used as tools in order for you to negotiate your terms with your lessors or licensors, or including people who sit out of service office spaces. So I think these are some of the strategies that you could use in order to negotiate and get some relief. That is vis-a-vis your rents. As regards salaries, look, there's a lot of confusion. The Ministry of Home Affairs, being the nodal ministry, especially after the Epidemic Diseases Act and the National Disaster Management Act has come into play, has come out with various notifications. Of course, it becomes the law of the land. So when that happens, I think it's important for you to really interpret the statute. So one of the interpretations that we have right now is, we are faced with a number of questions. I think the first question that comes into our mind is, the first question that is posed to us is, can we reduce salaries of employees? Can we do something with respect to their paid leave? Can we pay salary only to a certain category of people and leave the rest of them? Can we reduce salary by 50% to a large number of employees? Look, unfortunately, the Ministry of Home Affairs notification is not very clear. So our view is that it is mandatory for every employer to pay wages to its workmen or workers or employees. Now, the operational word that we use is wages. So if your salary is defined as a wage under the Industrial Disputes Act or the Minimum Wages Act or the Shops and Establishment Act of various states, then it is deemed as a wage. And if the employees' monthly payment is in the form of wages, it is mandatory for employers to honor it. while
Okay.
for the rest of the employees who are doing supervisory jobs or who are doing managerial roles, it is entirely governed by the employment agreement. Of course, now when it comes to other questions which governs regarding reduction of salary and stuff like that, so it really is governed by a couple of things. I think the first one is called change of conditions. So for some employees, change of conditions is governed by statute, which is the Industrial Disputes Act. For some employees, it could be governed by the agreement, and maybe also by the employee handbook, employment manuals. So you need to get back to that and look at it. So, of course, you might have read in newspaper, a lot of people have tried removing employees. So I think that probably was a bad strategy. They did not think through as to who should be removed or who can be removed and who should not be removed. Let me also tell you that this stipulation is only till the extent of lockdown. So maybe after May 3rd, you can revisit it, and then, if you do not require some resource, you can even terminate them, or you can accommodate them in some other fashion. So I think the new norms would be a amended employment agreement. I can see that a lot of new codes are going to come in. I think we already have the wage code in place. It's still not the date of the date is still not notified. So I think when all of these things come, a lot of startups would really relook at their employment agreements to try and ensure that very less people come within the definition of wages. So a little bit of reconstitution of your employment agreements would be required. Now, as with respect to your EMIs, look, this is really up to the banks, because the Reserve Bank of India has been kind enough and has recommended to the banks to provide a moratorium of 3 months on all term loans, and also there have been some relaxation on working capital. Now, since this has not happened with many NBFCs, so I see some struggle with respect to some startups. But I'm sure that in the coming days and weeks, we'll see everybody comply with this, and everybody accept it. I'm not saying comply with it. I think everybody will accept and adopt it, and then probably that will give the much required relief to startups.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Jidesh. Maybe this opens up a lot of notes which are clogged in our minds in terms of salaries, because since this news of many companies went haywire and just did a pay cuts and all this. The word wages, definitely that makes a lot of sense. Force majeure definitely makes a lot of sense. And I would be very honest, we went to a landlord and said, boy, you should give us a discount. And that's what we did, and we were upfront and we got it. So that's no shame on it. Plus, I know, Jidesh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Very clearly.
So, yeah, I know you are quite active during these current times. And maybe you have, I keep on following your post, you have helped a lot of companies to get a waiver in their rents and all. So that's too good of you. And maybe all the startups and even entrepreneurs in the large scale can get benefited what you said just now. Thanks a lot for putting light on all this. And maybe we'll just come back on this again.
In fact, Vijay, I would like to add. Vijay, I would like to add one point here. Dinesh has beautifully elaborated the changes in the judiciary system and the various relaxation. Just to add, there is a very good relaxation in IBC also. So, insolvency bankruptcy code is now a new method to be are being used for debt recovery from the corporates customers. So now the limit for getting into IBC has been increased from 1 lakh to 1 crore on the very first day of the lockdown. So 24th March, the lockdown was declared, lockdown 1.0 was declared. And on the very same day, the limit has been increased to 1 crore from 1 lakh. That means if a person has can go to IBC only if he owe more than 1 crore from other corporate debtor, and this is applicable for corporate debtors, not for partnership firm or individual.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for putting this insight also there. Okay, perfect. So should we move to the next question then? So this next question from my side goes to Ramesh, to you only, and this is what I want to ask with you is the COVID situation has major effect on businesses financially, right? And do expect any we expect any kind of relaxation to Indian businesses from direct or indirect taxation perspective? You added a beautiful insight over the IBC. Maybe now we can discuss about direct and indirect taxation too.
Well, Vijay, this is $4.5 billion loss each day for Indian economy, and there are businesses with typically no revenue, with almost similar kind of expenditure what they used to have before COVID situation. So now the situation is they have to maintain those expenses. They have to pay to employees, to the landlord, to the other fixed cost. Maybe EMI they have to pay. The other time costs are being same, because that would not be reduced due to this situation. And the revenue part, there are many business which are at zero level right now, because wherever there was a physical physical movement required. For example, one of the perfect example of our client who are into restaurant industry. So restaurants are completely shut these days. Even not a single rupee revenue is being generated from restaurant of any of the outlet they have. But they have to pay to their employees, their chefs, their waiters, and other operation staff. And this is not only one industry. There are many other industry which had almost zero revenue or very negligible revenue in these days. Also, there are some business who are pivoting also, and getting benefit of COVID situation. For example, one of our client who is into car upholstery manufacturing, they have turned down to now they are manufacturing the PPE, and they are supplying PPE to different government and non-government agencies. But in this situation, not many would be able to pivot, and not many would be able to generate revenue. So they are more towards the side side of having lesser revenue than the people who are generating revenue due to this situation. And we obviously, those business would require some kind of financial assistance, either from taxation part or any financial package. But we must also appreciate this loss is not only for business. This is for our fiscal ecosystem as well. If businesses are not earning, obviously the direct and indirect tax revenue will also go down. And in addition to that, there is a non-budgeted expenses which government of India has to incur on fighting the COVID situation. So and that is also estimated more than $100 billion in lockdown 1.0, and obviously after this lockdown 2.0, this might be doubled as expected earlier. So it is not likely to expect much of the tax benefit from direct tax or indirect point of view. First, because direct tax, there were already deduction on corporate taxation part for last 2 years. Secondly, there would be dip in taxation revenue collection. Third, normally in any such situation where there is a situation like this, like flood or any known man-made emergencies, the government always recover their cost in the form of additional tax, normally a cess. So but I believe need is more powerful than expectation, and the need of the hour is having a good financial survival package for businesses, including taxation benefit, and I'm expecting some of them, if not all.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for putting these lights, because This will help entrepreneurs to know that they can expect few relaxations, but not at all, because government also have to have money to run these safety measures they are doing currently, right?
Right.
Perfect. So that brings me, Chandra, to you, and this has been on buzz for quite a long. This question is just now on the screen, which says that because I don't want to defame China during this panel discussion or to put any bad words around it, but just a thought which is sprawling around across internet that will China will lose its shines towards its trading partners. So US is the most prominent country which imports goods from China. There is Hong Kong, Vietnam, and all these guys. And will we see countries like India, Bangladesh, Vietnam to get benefit from this? Like, will manufacturing entities will now look India and these countries as a hotspot to set up? And I know this won't happen in a short phase of time, but what do you feel like? Will it happen in a longer phase of a year or two? I would love to know from your side.
So, Vijay, I think we've been discussing about a lot of things, and things like crisis, difficult times, force measure, stabilizing the situation. These are some very, very critical factors, which also depends upon a lot on the cross-border trade as well. Like, from an outside per se, will China lose its shine? I would say it will not be like a 100% China will be blocked out. The way China has progressed over last few years, the level of competency, the technological advancements, and the bulk. They are a global manufacturing unit for almost all the countries across the globe. If you put $1,000 worth of exports, maybe $700 worth of exports would be accounted from China, or $600. And another 300 from rest of the world combined, all major exporting countries. Now, when we look at opportunities, of course, it will matter. It will be a matter from a perspective of how the government agencies react to it. Like, if you take an example of India, how ease of doing business will affect India. What kind of opportunities can we create? What kind of value added products can we manufacture for the global requirements? We have seen a lot of government authorities being vocal about it, especially US. You see Japan coming up, and they have literally.
Facing some voice issues from your side.
Is it better now?
Maybe now.
Is it better?
Yeah. Maybe now it is.
Yeah.
Some stuttering, and your video also blocked. I don't know if everyone else is experiencing the same, but I can
No,
see
Vijay,
your face.
no, Vijay, I think it's a network problem from your end, because we are having no issue with Chandra's voice.
All right. So,
okay, perfect. That might.
So what I was saying, the government agencies being literally vocal about these things, and when we look at scenarios like Japan has literally earmarked close to $250 million for companies to move out of China and move into different countries. And if you look at an alternative to China, countries like India, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines in the Far East comes as an attractive option. If you look at European clients or American clients for that matter, they will also explore these same markets. Plus, from a Central Asia perspective, Turkey is something which will also grow, which is also expected to grow big time in this space. And might be, European companies might also look at, going back to their older suppliers like Portugal and so on, or Latin American markets. So definitely, there will be a split. If China accounted for 60-70% worth of exports, down the line, in year and a half or 2 years, we'll see they might account for 30-40%. So it's all supply and demand. The demands will, are bound to grow again. Like, I would take an example of a high-end luxury store which reopened its business in China about a couple of weeks back. They clocked the best revenues worth of $4 million in a day. So there will be an increasing demand. I'm being quite optimistic. It's good to stay positive in these difficult times. So this is what we have been noticing. I've been speaking to a lot of promoters in past 1 month or so since the lockdown has happened. A lot of CFOs and a lot of advisors to the clients. Companies are strategizing. How they want to go about the new business opportunities. How do we go about it? But what will really matter most is the ease of doing business. How the local regulations will be simplified. A lot of them have simplified over past few months, years. Maybe Jitesh and Pravesh could shed some light on that as well. Policies have changed. FDI policies, India just passed one notification. I think it will be more elaborative. Someone from a tax or legal perspective could say about it. So that is where we see opportunities being shared. I would say another 30% could be taken out of China and spread across all the other major markets. Now it's an opportunity for all of us. Who comes and takes it first? Can India take advantage of this situation? Do we have the infrastructure for that? Do we have the policies for that? Do we have the local competency? India is one of the most competent countries when it comes to emerging market scenario. Likewise, when you look at something like a Bangladesh, which has been traditionally a manufacturing house for textiles and tea gardens and so on. So will they look into other avenues? Do they really have the competencies? So I think a lot of strategic calls will come in this. Definitely we'll see a paradigm shift, where we won't see 5 years down the line China being the only major global supplier, but we'll be having markets like India. Vietnam is something which is as a country which has been a common battleground for a US-China trade war. Chinese investments have been very aggressive in that space. US has also been aggressively investing. We see a lot of Indian companies going to Vietnam, or European companies as well. So definitely Vietnam is something is a place where you'll want to have one of your bases, especially if you are in the space of apparels, textiles, and so on, or in furnishings as well. So I think there will be something I would like to also add. This is something that we have realized over a lot of discussions with clients, with a lot of advisors in past 30, 40 days, is that what will happen now is that a lot of assets will open up and will be up for sale after the COVID lockdown is concluded and things are pretty much getting back to normal slowly and steadily, maybe in the later half of the 2020 or beginning of 21. So we might see not just inbound investments, but we might see a lot of cross-border investments going outbound as well for terms of acquisitions and so on. So I think there will be a lot of opportunities flying in. It's just about being cautious and being able to manage our cash flows really well. Something what Arjun also mentioned, that every dollar counts. So this is something that we will also need to look into. So that's my perspective.
Thanks a lot, Chandra, and putting this in perspective, because I do agree with you that at least 30% will be eroded from that market and will be distributed among these players, and they have to perform. Like I can say for India has to prove itself to become that cost effective for all the global territories to ship their products, right? So right now we have been seeing on both the platforms close to 80 viewers, and we have getting the questions. We already closed the clock by 48 minutes, but I have a few more questions to jump with you guys. So I would love to buy a few minutes more after 1 hour completes, right? And we will continue the session until we complete all these questions. So next question, Arjun, I would jump with you. And this is from my side, that which sectors will be the clear winner from this pandemic and which will lose the most? There are many we have been seeing, and what are the hidden gems which might come out, not now, but let's say after 3 months? And what will be the special invest strategy now onwards? You have touched a few strings in your introduction and the first question, but I would love to know more. What's your hotspot view on these sectors?
Yeah, we've been looking closely at what's happening and trying to evaluate what sectors and what sort of behavior changes are happening across the world. Consumer behavior as well as business behavior changes, right? I think, of course, as we'd already mentioned, some of these things are going to be evolving over a period of time. But obviously, there's renewed focus on healthcare, right? There was there for certain things. There's going to be more in terms of biotech, in terms of drug research are going to be areas which are going to be super important, right? Given the pandemic and given what we have seen and how the reactions. Right, I think that's going to be an important movement over the next few years. Right, so we have to look closely at diagnostic tools. We have to look at healthcare. Maybe remote diagnostics is going to be super important. Right, The lockdown is teaching us that work from home is a phenomena that can work extensively, and then more and more companies can do this, right? Which means how do you enable collaboration tools, communication tools? Bunch of these have already taken favor in the last few years and accelerated in the last few months now, right? Zoom is a classic example of what has happened, right? Of people using more and more video conferencing. Now there'll be need to have richness of experience within video conferencing, right? Because how can you bring video conferencing something that is very close to human meetings or face-to-face meetings, right? So collaboration tools, communication tools are going to be super important. What we are also noticing is how people spend time at home, right? People spending time at home leads to gaming, entertainment, content being super interesting areas, right? Where there'll be attention, right? The other thing that will take notice probably is to look at how commute and will change post-COVID, right? When people go back, right? Will public transportation be as important as opposed to, let's say, private transportation or shared transportation, shared mobility, so on and so forth, right? So there are some important areas where the future is going to be. In general, I will, the blanket I would put is there will be a premium on innovation, right? Standard business models will not work. What are you doing using technology to get most out of things, right? Where you're using technology for specific things of Delta, right? Home delivery of groceries, etc., has already become super popular, which was taking a slightly longer gestation period over the last few years, but now is automatically accelerated, right? So these are the 4 or 5 areas that we are looking at that I think will have a massive impact.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Arjun, for putting light on this. Maybe now I will jump to the next question to Pravesh sir, and that is going to be, do you suggest the startup should shift their base to other tax-friendly countries? If yes, which territories you will suggest the most? Because Chandra has touched a few points on how we are going to take benefit from this situation, and should now India should move to other tax domains. Indian startups should move.
So, Vijay, this is very common question being asked actually. However, this question is not something which can be answered straight away. There are, a lot of factors we need to evaluate before we reach it to any conclusion. And normally, whenever any queries come to us for this query, we, discuss in length that what are their plans, objective, and why do even they think of shifting their base from the home country to another country. And the most important part here I would like to communicate to all the viewer is uh, normally I feel queries has a lot of concern on this part, but I must tell you that this is not a permanent decision actually. So you can easily flip over whenever you want. Flipping over means you can change your country jurisdiction anytime for your business. Of course, this is a long-term decision and not a very short-term decision, but this is not permanent. So with this, before reaching to any conclusion, one must evaluate many factors. Where what is their aim? They want to save tax. They want to have a better jurisdiction. They want to have ease of doing business. They want good and cheap human resource. They want asset protection, and last but not least, where they want to see themselves after, at the age of their retirement, where they want to park their money in. These are the questions which are most relevant and most important to decide which country they should have based on. And secondly, not a single country is an answer to all questions. Each country has some benefits and some pros and cons. For example, Singapore is the most preferred country these days, especially from point of view of investors, because it had no dividend tax and no capital gain tax system. But there are other countries which had zero taxation system, but still businesses are not going there. Um, if we talk about a decade before, a lot of people has set up their ecosystem in country like Mauritius and other tax friendly country. But now when the Indian government, Indian tax system, started looking at zero tax country as, from the, from closed eyes, business has started moving to from zero tax to lower tax countries like Singapore. Secondly,
Right.
if somebody is more interested to have asset protection, so country like Nevis, is the answer, because in such country, filing a legal suit against you is not easy. For filing a legal suit against you, they have to submit the cost of proceeding from your end also before filing the suit. So there are many things which have to be taken care before deciding to this question. So first we need to decide what our aim is, and then only the country may be decided. Last but not least, in this COVID situation, maybe there might be few countries who has lower tax or no tax. They might implement some taxes. For example, many years back, Dubai did not have any indirect taxation system. Now they have. So again, it's a dynamic situation, and one has to consider the business objective first, and do not just focus only on taxation. But yes, tax efficient structure
Correct.
is also very important.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for answering this so well. Maybe next question I would jump to, Kailash. This is for you. Will cash money startups, which were trending in 2017 to 19, uh, for example, WeWork was there, will still be on buzz? And should founders now focus on bottom line rather than top line? This is the highlight, and this is one question am just eager to know your
Yeah,
views
sure.
also.
Sure. I think we discussed briefly some time ago as well. I think when Arjun spoke about this, the borrowing system on growth at all costs, right? I think that's something that we will see less of. One, because I think going forward, companies which are going to raise the next round, or even if their first institutional round, much more, even if companies which have raised a VC round in the past and are companies existing in portfolios of certain venture capitalists, we'll see sort of a pushback on how on discretionary spending. Spending will be questioned. Each line item in your predictions will be questioned because their impact will be thought through even more thoroughly before it can be sort of. I'm not saying people are going to become micromanagers. What I'm saying is, I think founders and their investors will be a little more wary about where the cash flows are going, right? Especially if it's going to acquire, I mean, it's not if it's not going to service existing customer, but it's going to acquire additional customers, it'll have to be thought through more clearly. So more than just the growth or the delta in the top line, now you're going to look at the increase in the operational cash flow. Cash is going to become the thing. I mean, these are traditional discipline metrics, right? This is metrics which has to be thought even in the sort of stable state. But these are going to gain more prominence during crisis like this. So we'll see less cash being splurged and more cash being conserved because founders will be pushed to extend their runways. We have seen, unfortunately, in smaller startups where founders have had to let go of some of the human capital resources, which is very unfortunate. But then these are times which are not normal. These are crazy times. So it's called for measures which we wouldn't see in ordinary times. But what I'm saying is, the founders are now being questioned on what is the runway that they have available, and see if they can extend their runway to maybe, I mean, if it was 6 months, maybe to 12 months or so, just to ensure that the business doesn't get affected if the next funding round is going to be delayed, right? So yeah, for sure. Now there's going to be greater focus on line items below the top line in your P&L and in the balance sheet beyond below your beyond your long-term assets. You're going to think more so about what's your inventory planning, how's your receivables going to look like. See if you can extend your payables for some more time to ensure that you have cash for longer duration than otherwise than you thought prior to this. So questions are, I mean, fundamentals are being going to get questioned. So so to answer your question in short, one statement, yeah, sure, for sure. we go into a question about a company's ability to bring in cash and not just generate a top line. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Kailash. Although we have crossed our 1 hour limit for today, but I have just one or two questions, and maybe a lot of things have already been touched. So we'll make it quick. Then we have comments flowing in from YouTube and Facebook. I will pick few comments from there. I can't pick everyone, but maybe a few selective which we haven't touched today. So Judesh, you have already talked about all the judiciary parts which has been coming in, but maybe a small light on this again, that what government is doing. Maybe there are some unturned stones which are still to be opened up, and do you feel this is going to be there in the market?
Sure. Thank you again, Vijay. I think fantastic insights by all the speakers, and very relevant during these times and very forward-looking. So a couple of things. I think I just probably put it in 3 points. I think the first thing, clearly the government has to come out with some kind of a package to support the business ecosystem. It doesn't matter whether it's small, it doesn't matter if it's medium, micro, or large enterprise. I think it's important. And I know for a fact in the next 3 to 4 days, we are coming out with a policy package which is going to benefit, a financial package which is going to benefit industries and employers. So I think that's a positive thing. The second is Provident Fund contributions, which was right now limited to only employees which earn less than about 10 or 15,000 rupees per month, is going to get extended. We do not know if it's going to get extended to all employees, or is it going to be hiked to maybe another level. So that's the second one. I think the third thing is, in terms of ensuring the speed of delivery of work passes and approvals to essential services and goods companies. I think if the government were to do these 3 things quick, it will really enable the businesses and also ensure that when the lockdown gets removed and maybe in the next couple of months, everything will come back to normal and life goes on as how it was about before the COVID.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Judesh. And maybe last one from Chanda. Chanda, you have touched upon how India will be getting benefit from China losing it, or whatever, how we frame it. But you also deal into offshore funds, right? And into multiple geographies. Still, will be that in a buzz, and will we see more FDIs coming in from these offshore funds to India, or this will be a halt for a few months? Just an insight from your side.
So I would say, a lot of all the factors, that all our other panelists have touched upon, focusing on bottom line, stop burning the money excessively, making every dollar count, looking at alternative sectors, not focus on tax friendly and more on the business strategic locations, having a good ecosystem. I think these factors would really account for, how we see the offshore funds looking at India as a strategic avenue. Now, what we have seen, in the past few years, that we have been setting up a lot of funds for our clients in different geographies, Latin America, European markets, South Asia, Indian markets especially, a couple of funds about in the last fiscal year. So, we've seen clients are raising some of the funds and they have some serious commitments coming in. So it's not like, we are all, cash depleted. There are cash reserves with, a lot of investors still parked, but they are being very, very careful and strategic about where they really want to make investments now. Now priorities will change. Sectors influencing social distancing reforms will be really looking at, at a good amount of traction, or technologically driven, startups. Most of the startups, or rather all of the startups, are driven upon the technology. And we see in India, India is a tech powerhouse. Sitting in Bangalore gives us that pipe. And we see from our understanding, we are seeing a lot of traction coming into the markets. India is definitely going to benefit upon from the traction that we'll be receiving from some offshore investors, and the kind of positioning that India has created in the COVID crisis. So we should really give it to the government to the way they have presented us to the whole global market. So definitely a lot of confidence will come from that. Of course, we won't see immediate investments coming in right, after the lockdown shuts off and all. There will be a period of time, where once things start to stabilize in a quarter's time or something like that, where we'll see a good amount of inflow of FDIs coming into India, and also in very very strategic markets like Brazil and Mexico. So this is from a fund administrator's perspective that we have been seeing in past few months. This is where we also have been focusing upon. So definitely, this is something for us to look forward to. Maybe Arjun, Kailash, or Pravesh or Jidesh might want to add something to this. If what I say is in agreement with them as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Thanks a lot, Chandra, for putting in. I guess we have done with the questions, and I have taken a lot of time of you guys. But we have received some wonderful questions on the from the portals as well, and I would just take a few, maybe 2 or 3 now, because I know you guys need for future calls, next calls and all. So this is one question which has been asked on YouTube, which has been by Lakshmikant Sharma, and he asked to the VCs on panel, how do you see valuation benchmarking vis-a-vis before Corona and after Corona period? So we have touched brief, but maybe Arjun or Kailash, any one of you would touch on this.
Yeah, maybe I'll take a stab in. I think what we are noticing is that I think valuation will first start getting impacted at late stage, right? Where there is need for cash and where there is the revenues were already there and there was a growth momentum which is stalled, right? And therefore the future rounds when they need cash will be recalibrated by incoming investors or existing investors, as the case might be, right? So the impact will first happen at later stages in Series B, C, and D, and from there the trickle effect will come into Series A and seed, right? As you start seeing that, when later stage investors start reducing valuations, or there are flat rounds, or in some cases, in the extreme cases, there could be down rounds as well, then the earlier stage investors start thinking that, if later stage is not going to pay a premium, right, why should I be paying a premium which has been happening over the last 2 to 3 years, or right, when the times were good, right? Times were good, there was excess supply of capital, and therefore more people were competing over deals, and then prices went up, right? And now when there is going to be paucity, or there's going to be more focus on, only very few people will deploy capital, only on the best ones, right? Prices will come down at the later stages, that will then trickle down is what I'm seeing. So I think there'll be a lag effect of some of these things, particularly for stages like us on the early stage, right? Maybe Kailash can throw a little more light on later stages, right? But on the seed stage, I don't see immediate impact on valuation changes, right? Because at seed stage, you're not really looking at high revenues and those multiples basis which valuations are anyway done, right? But slowly, as Series B, C, D, etc., late stage valuations get some correction or reasonable correction and reevaluation, then early stage also will start reacting accordingly, right? So that's the way I would look at it. Right now, seed stage should be same. Later stage will get impacted. 2 to 3 quarters, we'll find out about what happens in the early stage.
Sure. Perfect. Thanks a lot, Arjun, for putting light on it. I have multiple questions, but I still, and I believe many of them are already answered by our panelists today. I will just take one more question, which I believe is still untouched. This is by Mayank Mishra. He asked, would be like how much time it will take to stabilize after this pandemic is over. I believe on one or few points we have talked about this, but maybe someone can just give us some hope that what do you feel is going to be the best time zone to feel that, okay, we'll come out normal. Maybe Jidesh, you can help us?
That's $1 trillion question, isn't it?
Honestly, I have to play the soothsayer here. Firstly, we still do not know whether it is over, because we do not know if we are in the early stage or the mid stage or the late stage of the COVID pandemic. But I am extremely hopeful that in the next 3 months' time, I'm playing soothsayer here, but I'm hopeful in the next 3 months, everything should be in place, and we should be back to our offices and living our normal lives. Because I'm just following the cue from South Korea and China and probably some European countries. I think we've done fantastically well as a country till now.
Sure.
And hopefully, if this continues, 3 months, we should be on the roads again and back to our normal lives.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Jidesh. Hearing this gives a sense of relaxation to us, because there has been news that maybe 1 year, 2 years, and there have been studies that it says 2024 is
Yeah,
to look normal, right?
2022.
Yeah. I have studies for 24 as well now in the market floating. So
The good
thanks
positive
a lot,
note. I
Jidesh.
think
Good positive.
it's important to be optimistic in these times.
Yeah, I would love to now close on this note itself. We have a lot of comments. Sorry for the viewers I couldn't take, because time is constraint. I might be very much keen into listening to my questions, answers, but we will love to keep these kind of sessions again. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us. Arjun, Kailash, Pravesh sir, Chandar, Jidesh, you guys were wonderful. I learned a lot. Maybe our viewers would have also learned this from this session. And maybe I will just leave a note for you guys after this. Perfect. Thanks a lot. Signing off, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Pravesh, for having us.
Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you, Vijay. Thanks
Take
for
care,
that.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.